Something that comes up in conversation quite a lot with my own drum students is how should I set my drums up? I've already done a video about this with electric drums. I'll post a link up somewhere around here for that one. But I'm going to focus on the acoustic kit today because it's very different to an electric kit, as everything's bigger for a start, so it feels totally different sitting at an acoustic kit than it does to an electric kit. The way that you set your drums up is very personal to you, so it totally depends on you yourself physically, how big or small are you. The size of your drums changes, you know, some drummers use huge drums, some drummers use smaller drums, whether it's an 18-inch kick or a 24-inch kick, or, you know, I've got 13 and 16 toms, you might have 10 and 14. Snare drums are different sizes, cymbals are different sizes. And of course, different drummers have a totally different amount of drums on the kit. I've only got 2 toms here, but some drummers have 2 rack toms, 1 floor tom, or you might have 2 floor toms, you might have some extra little toms up here. You might have loads of cymbals or just the bare minimum like I have. And you'll notice if you watch drummers from different genres, watch a jazz drummer versus a metal drummer or a rock drummer, whatever, you'll see similarities and differences between how those types of drummers set their drums up and the types of drums that they use. The most important thing really is that you set the drums up around you and the setup works for how you play, rather than setting the kit up how you think it should look and then trying to sit at it. It's more important that you can reach everything easily based on your own movements. So I'm going to strip this kit down and we're going to start just from the seat, and then we're going to build the kit up piece by piece, how I would set my kit up, and I'll show you kind of why I put everything in the place that it is. This is not a tutorial on how to set a hi-hat clutch or how to set a cymbal stand up or anything like that. It's just a guide on what you should think about while you're placing your drums at the kit. So let's start off by getting the bass drum in a good position relative to your seating position. So let's talk a little bit about the seat as well. Seat height is quite a subjective thing. Again, some players like to sit really low, some players like to sit really high. I used to sit much lower than I do now when I was younger. But as I've tinkered with my setup over the years to try and make it better for me, I found that raising my seat, it's gradually got higher over the years. My back feels better after a gig. I feel like I can get around the drums better. I feel like I'm play the bass drum better with a slightly higher position. So now I like to sit with my hips just higher than my knee. So there's a bit of a slope down from my hips to my knee. It just helps me to play the bass drum better. If you think about the angle of your feet and your legs when you sit in a natural position, this becomes the center of your kit. This is where I'm facing forward. It doesn't match the kick. If I was to line the kick up with the same angle as what I'm sitting at, I would feel like I'm trying to like curve my leg round to match the kick drum plate on the pedal. I like to offset the kick a little bit on an angle which matches the angle of my leg facing that way. And the same when I eventually bring the hi-hat in, I'm going to try and get it as close to this natural position here. Obviously, there's always a compromise. The size of your hi-hat is going to determine how far away or how much you bring them in, because it's got to match your sticking position as well. So that's a bit of a compromise, but we'll work on that when we get the hi-hats in. But yeah, the first thing I do when I set my kit up is get my seat and the bass drum down, and it's working from the bottom up, but getting your feet in a natural position first is important. So next, if we add the snare drum into the setup, the snare drum is really like the center of your kit. It sits right in the middle of your 2 legs. It's right in front of you. Everything else really does work around the snare drum position. If you think of this as the center of your kit. Obviously, there's a few different variables you can think about. Thinking relative to your seating position, you want to be able to hit the center of the snare drum easily when you're just in a relaxed resting position. So thinking about how far to have your seat from the snare drum. If you sit too far away, you feel like you're reaching out to the snare drum. You don't want your elbows to be coming further forward than your body. So if you sat too far away to hit the middle of the snare drum, you can be reaching too far. If you sit too close to the snare drum and your elbows end up behind your body, again, that's not a relaxed position to play from, and you feel like everything's scrunched up. So you want to just think about where your elbows are by your sides and be able to hit the middle of the snare drum from that position. And the same for the bass drum as well, like how far away should your bass drum be or how close should it be? I always try and keep my ankle slightly in front of my knee, so you can kick into the drum. Again, if you sit too close to the kick and your heel ends up behind your knee, it's almost like you're kicking the wrong way, right? You're going backwards. You want to kick into the drum, so you want a bit of a slope from your knee to your ankle to kick into the drum. And again, just sitting in a natural, relaxed position. As for the height of your snare drum, I've noticed that this changes by watching different drummers who use a kind of different style or using different grips. If you watch a lot of drummers who sit quite high or play with the French grip here quite a lot, you might notice. And the snare drum's a little bit lower down, or very low down. If I bring the snare drum down, it encourages your wrist to rotate in like this. So you play with more like a French grip because you're trying to get your hands between your legs really. It doesn't feel as comfortable to play over in the German grip because your hand position is much higher than the drum. Again, I used to play with my snare drum lower than it is now because I used to play more this way when I'm hitting the snare drum. But as I've made a conscious effort over the years to play more from the German grip this way, that's encouraged me to bring the snare drum up higher. So I can still play a nice rim shot from that position, and it's comfortable. It's comfortable height from this kind of resting place here. On the other end of that, if you watch some drummers who play traditional grip, I've seen drummers play with the snares even higher to accommodate that grip. So, oh God, the snare drum doesn't go that high. Put it even higher, that accommodates this traditional grip. Because you don't want to be kind of going too low when you're using traditional grip. Not that I ever play with traditional grip, but I've noticed that drummers who use this grip more tend to have the snare drums like quite high, like belly button height. And then thinking kind of towards the right or left, how far you put it in or out from the bass drum. I just try and keep it in the center. Think of the center of your body, try and keep the center of the drum there. Again, that's gonna face straight down, kind of offset to the kick. So I wouldn't want to try and sit more this way, because now my right foot's out of position for playing the bass drum. So it's keeping that angle and keeping that as the center. It's always worth taking the time to get these things right when you set your kit up. If you've got the time, sometimes you're in a rush, you might be late for your gig or you've got to get on. But I've noticed any time that I take more time to set my drums up properly, I just have a better gig for it, rather than trying to rush things up and you find that you're moving things halfway through the gig because you haven't set them up properly and you're trying to change the setup as you go. Just get it right in the first place. Take your time if you do have the time. So when we place the hi-hat here, obviously we've got to think about the pedal position for your foot, but also the position here for your stick as well. My legs are still in that natural, relaxed position. I haven't put it too far away where I'm having to stretch out too far. I'm not crushing it in there so it's covering half the snare drum and it's too close. I'm just keeping it in that natural position there. It's actually a little bit closer than the kick pedal is, so I'm not sat. To keep it really, really symmetrical, I'll have to put the hi-hat further back there. Now my feet are really even. But for me, that's too far away there. I want the cymbals a little bit closer to me, so that's a bit of a compromise there, just to bring it in. And now I can play, I think of keeping the stick straight there. It's going right through the middle of the hi-hat there. I'm not playing at any weird angles. It's nice and relaxed to hit the center, to hit the center of the hi-hat. And I'm in a nice relaxed position here to hit the hi-hat and the snare together. And my foot's nice and relaxed for stepping. stepping the hi-hats. Thinking of how far apart to have the two cymbals on your hi-hat is, again, totally a matter of taste. It depends on how you play again. Some drummers have the hi-hats quite far apart. That's a bit silly. I'll try and set the hi-hat by kind of foot pressure on the pedal. Think about how far you want to press the pedal down so it's not hard work to keep the hi-hats together. You know, if you set the hi-hats really far apart, I'm obviously going to an extreme here, but if I set them that far apart, to play a nice tight hi-hat, I've got to press the pedal all the way down. I'm actually kind of like leaning into it now. Whereas if I set them just so they're clear of each other, so they're not touching when you open it, now it's much easier to play a closed hi-hat, and I can still get them all the way apart. And if you want to play a kind of like half open sloshy hi-hat when you're rocking out, you don't have to lift too much to get them apart, so you're not lifting your foot all the way off the pedal or anything. And again, the size of your hi-hat is going to dictate how far away your stand is. I'm using 15-inch hi-hats there. Maybe if I was using 14s, I could bring them closer in a little bit to get the edge at the same place. If you use 16, 17, seen drummers using 19-inch hi-hats, you're obviously going to have to put them further away, otherwise they're going to come to like here, right? The height of your hi-hats, again, that's totally a taste thing, and it depends on kind of what kind of stuff you play, you know. Watch a lot of rock and metal drummers getting the hi-hats right up here, even higher if you're Dave Grohl. So you can kind of like chunk right into the sides of the hi-hats, and you've got loads of clearance between your hands for slamming the drums. If you watch some kind of more funkier and quieter drummers, they might have the hi-hats a little lower to kind of play on the top a little bit more, but I actually change the height of the hi-hats depending on what the gig is. So when I'm doing rock gigs, I lift them up a little bit higher, not usually much higher than this. Can maybe go to here if I really want to smash the drums that night. And sometimes it encourages me to play it quieter when the hi-hats are lower down, playing on the top of the hi-hat. So sometimes if I'm doing a pop or a soul gig or whatever, I've got to be a little quieter. I might bring the hi-hats down a little. But now we've got the core of the kit set up, really, kick, snare and hi-hat, the three kind of fundamental parts of the kit. And it's all set up around you. It's all set up around your seating position, and everything's really comfortable to get a good start. So now we can start adding some toms into the setup. So now I've added the rack tom in. My rack tom sits on a snare stand rather than being on a, I don't know if you can see that there, but it is on a snare stand. As I've got an undrilled bass drum, so it doesn't have a post in for the two tom mounts. I much prefer that because you've got a little bit more freedom about where you can put the rack tom. I've had kits that I've had the center post with the tom arms, and I feel like I can't get the tom enough. This way, again thinking of that center and the way that you're facing, if you want the tom to be in front of you, the toms mounted on those center posts always seem to be too far to the right for me. One of the things to look out for, especially when you're placing your toms, is look at where all your stick marks are on the heads. So I'll play with my rack tom a little bit further to the right than it used to be, so I don't play it directly in front. It's like slightly there. I guess from moving that way around the kit when you're playing drum fills, you're naturally kind of going slightly to the right to get the rack tom, not going straight in front, because that makes the gap between the rack tom and the floor tom bigger, so it's harder to get around the kit. So I've got it tucked in towards the bass drum a little bit, because I noticed when I had the tom further this way, I noticed a lot of my stick marks on the head were to the right of center. So instead of trying to correct that by trying to hit the center of the drum. I just moved the center of the drum to match where I was playing, naturally moving to that position. So if I move the tom back to here, and I'm kind of hitting here quite a lot, I'll just move the drum over to this way. And now the center's where I would want to hit it, rather than me trying to hit the drum. The drum's where I want to hit. And again, the height and the angle of your toms is totally just up to you. Some drummers like to use really flat toms, like you watch like Travis Barker plays with his rack tom really kind of low down, almost on his snare level, and it's quite, as well, it's really flat. Watch other drummers who use massive drums, so like Dave Grohl in his Nirvana days using big, like 14-inch floor tom sized rack toms. You obviously need to get a bit more of an angle on that because the drum's bigger. But just use your own physical feedback when you're playing. You know, are you hitting the center of the drum? Does it sound good when you hit it? Are you hitting the rims quite a bit? If your tom's too flat, do you feel like you're having to play over the top of it? If you get a lot of like dints in your drum head, like pitting, you maybe have it too angled, so you're hitting the drum on a weird angle rather than hitting it flatter. I just try and keep the angle of my rack tom kind of parallel to where I hit with the sticks. So I'm not coming at it from over the top with a weird angle. I'm not at risk of hitting the rims if it's too flat. That's just a really natural way to hit dead center on the rack tom and keep everything accurate. Let's bring the floor tom in. So positioning the floor tom, we're just trying to think of the same things that we did to position the snare and the rack tom in the correct place. Again, you can be restricted by the size of the drum. The bigger the drum that you use, the further the center is going to be away from the kick drum, because you can only get it so close to the kick. So that's a bit of a compromise. I've noticed from playing other people's drum kits that my setup is quite compact. I don't have things too far away. If you've ever been invited up by a friend to play a couple of tunes at a gig and you've got to play on their kit, sometimes you can sit at someone else's kit and just be like, this is so weird. You know, the floor tom might be like much further away. There might be a kind of a bigger footprint to the setup. I've noticed mine's quite small to some of my friends' kits that I've played. I like to keep my like floor tom quite close. It's not too far away, so I don't have to reach really far to play a fill. I can keep everything in this position here without having to reach too far out. So I like to bring the floor tom in just here and I have it pretty close to the kick. But again, it's just be aware of where the center of the drum is while you're playing. And again, take notice of where your stick marks are as you go, and you might make little changes just to keep that in a really easy position. You think about playing without looking. You want to be able to hit all of the drums without looking. I have to sing quite a bit when I'm gigging, so I have a mic here, which is a terrible place to have a mic because your neck's always twisted. What can you do? So I have to play quite often while I'm looking this way, so I need to know where the center of the drum is to be able to still play without looking. And again, the angle and the height is just wherever it's comfortable for you. You might have an angle towards you, you might have it angled away from you, it might be lower than the snare, on the same height as the snare. As long as you can hit the center and you can make it sound good and you're not accidentally hitting the rims, just mess around with it as you go, as you play, and think, can I make this more comfortable? Can I make it better? Is it in the right or the wrong place? Just be aware of it when you're playing and know that you can always change it. So now I've added the ride cymbal into the setup. Again, this is going to be totally different depending on how many drums you use. So one of the reasons I like to only use one rack tom is so I can get the ride into this position where the second rack tom would usually be. When you use two rack toms up the top there, you've got to put the ride further away. You've either got to bring it round all the way around here, or you've got to put it up the top above the middle rack tom, which obviously places it further away, and that just feels like it's too much of a reach for me. Again, I like to play everything quite compact so I can reach everything just from this place here. Think about where you position it relative to your toms. I don't want to bring it too close. It's going to hang too far over the floor tom, so I can't hit the middle of the floor tom without accidentally catching the ride now and again. So you're trying to keep it out the way of your drum fills. We're just making sure you can hit all the zones from the bell through to the bow and the edge, while maintaining a natural arm position and not reaching too far away. If I was to place it further over here, I feel like I'd be reaching too far to get there. And think about how you move from the ride to the snare drum. That's an easy motion to get back and forth from the ride to the snare rather than having to go too far. Again, the size of the cymbal is going to affect where you place it. I'm using a 22-inch ride here. Sometimes I use a 21, so I can feel the difference in where I place the ride depending on just that 1-inch difference in the cymbals. But again, just feel out as you're playing, like, is the angle, is it too much of an angle, or is it too flat? Are you struggling to hit the bell? Can you crash into the edge of the ride easily when you're playing? Just keep moving it around till you find what works for you. Let's chuck in the 2 crash cymbals and we'll complete the setup. So now I've got my 2 crash cymbals in position. And again, it's just about putting them in a place that's comfortable. And everyone's got different, you know, some players play with crashes really high up. Some have them kind of really like this far down, just above the hats and the toms. I'm somewhere in between. I like to keep them. That's relatively high. Most people comment on my kit saying that my crashes are really high up. But I like to keep them out of the way, so I don't want to catch this crash whenever I'm moving to the rack tom. So I try and keep that clear of there. If I was to move it in here, obviously that's going to be right in the way, and I'll be accidentally catching it now and again. So try and keep it clear of the rack tom, but not too far this way, because again, I still want to be able to get around the kit quite easily without reaching too far over this way. And again, thinking of how close it is to you or how far away, just use your reach to tell you where that's a really natural place to just catch the edge of the cymbal, not reaching too far out. As for the right hand crash, the ride side, I generally have that a little bit lower than the hi-hat side crash. It just makes it easier to kind of sweep across from there. And I tend to ride quite a lot on this cymbal. So having it a bit lower down just makes it easier. I'm not reaching in an unnatural position if it's too high. I can keep my hands in this position. And I can get quite easily from the ride to the crash without having to move too much. It's still clear of the floor tom again, so I can hit the middle of the floor tom, and that's not getting in the way. And it's a nice reach to get, you know, thinking of getting from the end of a fill around the kit to get into that crash. It follows the flow of my hands to hit that cymbal quite easily. And that's about it, really. It's always an evolving thing, so the longer you play and the better you get, and you find that your technique's changing, hopefully for the better, you'll start to change your kit. As you get into different musical settings, playing different gigs, any time that I need to play quieter, I set everything much lower down, and any time I'm allowed to play much louder, I tend to set up things a little bit higher. That just works for me. I think as well, as you start to develop your own identity behind the kit, your setup tends to be a part of that. Like, think of any of your favorite drummers and think of their drum kits. Their setup is just as recognizable as their playing is, you know, whether it's Dave Grohl with these huge rack toms and hi-hats all the way up here in the Nirvana days, or Travis Barker, again, he's got his hi-hats really high up with these flat toms, using quite small drums. John Bonham with his big Vistalite acrylic kit. They're all kind of iconic things. And I think as well, the trap that all of us fall into at some point is, because we all have our favorite drummers, we kind of try and set our drums up like they do, and that doesn't really work. You can take the ideas from their setups about like what they use and how they position it, but you've still got to make it work for you. if I was to try and set my kit up like Travis Barker and try and play, I would suck because I'm not used to those same kind of movements that he uses. The same, I remember when I was younger, one of the first acoustic kits that I had a 20-inch kick and 10, 12 and 14 toms, and I would try and set it up like I was Dave Grohl with a 26 kick and a 14 and an 18 tom, and it just didn't work because his setup was to accommodate the size of those drums, not smaller drums. So you've got to make your drums work for you and keep everything really comfortable, and just continuously give yourself feedback about how things feel when you play. Are you hitting the middle of the drums? Again, take notice of your stick marks on all your drums to make sure they're in the center. If they're not, you might need to move the drum. And as long as your playing feels good and it sounds good, there's not much else to worry about really. So I also meant to do this as I was going, but I totally forgot. I was going to do some kind of POV angles with my phone. But I'll walk through the kit now that it's all set up. You can see where my legs are placed there, that's a natural position. Again, I don't have the hi-hat too far over this way, or I'm not trying to sit with a crazy angle on the kick where my legs are spread too far, because it becomes uncomfortable. I can feel my hips kind of stretching out too far. So it's just from a natural position, and then the snare right in the middle. So from a nice resting position, I can keep my stick right in the middle of the snare drum, and that's really easy to hit the middle. I don't have to think about reaching out to find the middle of the snare drum. It's just where I would naturally hit. Hi-hat, again, that's placed where I can still rotate my wrist through different grips all the way around to here. I'm not having to make any weird movements to do that. I'm not having to go out of my way to try and hit the hi-hat from a weird position. Rack tom, going straight forward. Again, it's not, the center of my rack tom isn't matching the center of the snare really, because I'm generally moving around the kit in this direction. But that's where I tend to find I'm the most accurate, by hitting the middle of the tom. Again, a lot of my stick marks were landing here, I noticed, when my tom was further that way. So I started moving it in, which means this center here became that center there. And it's much easier to hit. Again, no matter where the rotation of my wrist is as well, to use the different grips, right? Moving around to the floor tom. Again, looking for where the middle of the drum is. And maybe, see, I'm changing it already. Maybe bring that in a little bit more. Sometimes I find that I'm catching, again, looking at stick marks, I'll notice that I'm hitting here. So we'll try and bring the drum closer in. Again, there's only so close you can bring it, because your bass drum's in the way. Just making sure you can comfortably hit the middle of the drum and you're not reaching out, or you're not, making weird angles with your wrist and ruin your technique to try and play the drums. A ride cymbal, you can see it's clear of the two toms. It's not really in the way, and I can get all the way around that cymbal without having to reach too far out. It's not a massive task to try and reach the ride cymbal. And then the crashes, again, I suppose my cymbals are quite high by the usual standard, but I like to just have them out of the way. One thing I didn't speak about actually is the angle of your crash cymbals. It might look really cool, but don't play them super flat like this. Take it from someone who has broken a stupid amount of crash cymbals over the years. I'm doing quite well with these ones actually, but they'll only last so long. Try and have them angled so you're not playing into the edge. That will definitely break your cymbals. It doesn't do much for your sticks either if you want your sticks to last. But just make sure you can sweep across the cymbal. Without smashing into it. Again, on this one you can see the angle of the cymbal matches where I can play the top of the cymbal, right? I'm not smashing into the edge, because that's a sure fire way to knock your cymbals. And that's it. Go and have fun with your drums. See you in a bit.